What would you do if a quiet Sunday morning turned into something out of a mystery? In the small, peaceful town of Millbrook, a stray dog named Buddy interrupted a mass, and what happened next left everyone stunned. The day started like any other. The sun rose slowly, lighting up the old streets and casting shadows on St. Michael's Parish. This little church, tucked near the grand Millbrook Cathedral, was calm and peaceful. Inside, Father Thomas, a kind priest with a gentle smile, was getting ready for the morning mass. The cool air inside carried the smell of incense, and the church was filled with soft whispers as people arrived. Rachel, a teacher with deep faith, took her usual seat near the front. Beside her sat Jack, the town's mechanic, clutching his rosary in his rough hands. At the back, Olivia, the choir leader, prepared her hymns with quiet focus. Mass began like always. The prayers and songs flowed, creating a comforting rhythm. But as Father Thomas glanced at the new statue of St. John Paul II near the altar, he felt a strange sense of unease. The statue looked so lifelike, its expression almost watchful. The feeling passed quickly, and Father Thomas dismissed it as nothing. Nobody in the church knew that this peaceful morning was about to take a very strange and unsettling turn. Just as Father Thomas began his sermon, a loud bang echoed through the church. The heavy wooden doors flew open, and a strong gust of wind swept inside. Gasps filled the air as everyone turned to see a dog, Buddy, the stray known around Millbrook, standing in the doorway. But something was wrong. Buddy wasn't his usual calm and friendly self. His fur was bristling, his eyes wide with what looked like fear. Without hesitation, he dashed down the aisle, his claws clicking against the old stone floor. Every step was frantic, as if he was chasing something no one else could see. The congregation sat frozen in shock. Whispers began to spread like ripples. "It's a bad omen," muttered an elderly woman, clutching her rosary. "Maybe there's a rat behind the altar," suggested a young man, trying to sound logical but failing to mask his unease. Buddy didn't stop until he reached the new statue of St. John Paul II. Then, to everyone's surprise, he started barking loudly. His sharp, urgent barks echoed through the church, interrupting the prayers and filling the space with tension. Father Thomas approached slowly, his voice calm. "Buddy," he said softly, "what's wrong, friend?" He reached out a hand, but Buddy didn't even glance at him. The dog's attention stayed locked on the statue, his barking growing louder, more desperate. The unease in the room deepened. Rachel leaned toward Jack and whispered, "Something's not right. He's not acting like himself." "I've never seen Buddy like this," Jack replied, furrowing his brow. Then Buddy did something even stranger. He started scratching at the base of the statue with his paws. The scraping sound against the stone sent chills down the spines of everyone in the room. It was as if he was trying to dig something out. Suddenly, as if frightened by something no one else could see, Buddy stopped. He stepped back, his ears pinned low, and with one last bark, he turned and bolted out of the church. The silence that followed was heavy and thick. All eyes turned to Father Thomas, who stood motionless, staring at the base of the statue. Slowly, he approached the spot where Buddy had scratched. At first glance, there was nothing unusual, but when he ran his hand over the surface, he felt it, a faint crack, nearly invisible to the naked eye. "What's going on?" Rachel asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Father Thomas didn't answer. He simply stared at the crack, a strange chill running through him. The mass ended soon after, but the tension lingered. People left the church whispering about Buddy's strange behavior. Father Thomas stayed behind, alone in the now empty church. His eyes kept returning to the statue. The crack at its base seemed to hold more than just a physical flaw. It carried a sense of something hidden, something waiting to be revealed. That night, a strange unease settled over Millbrook. The events at the church stayed on everyone's mind, especially for those who had been there. As the town fell quiet, 4 people found themselves unable to rest. Father Thomas, Rachel, Jack, and Olivia. Father Thomas lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The image of Buddy barking at the statue wouldn't leave his mind. Every time he closed his eyes, he could hear the echo of those barks and see the crack in the statue. Frustrated, he got out of bed and walked to the window. The moonlight illuminated the empty streets, casting long shadows. Near the church entrance, he spotted a dark shape. It was Buddy. The dog sat perfectly still, staring at the church doors as if guarding something. "What are you looking at, Buddy?" Father Thomas whispered to himself. A shiver ran down his spine, and he turned away, unable to shake the feeling that something was very wrong. Elsewhere in town, Rachel tossed and turned in her sleep. Finally, she slipped into a restless dream. In the dream, she stood in the church, alone and surrounded by darkness. A figure stepped out from the shadows, St. John Paul II. But this wasn't the kind, peaceful image she knew from photographs and paintings. This version of the saint seemed stern, almost grim. The saint leaned toward her, his voice low and urgent. "Guard what is hidden. Don't let the darkness escape." Rachel woke with a scream, her body drenched in sweat. She sat up, trembling, and looked at the clock. It was 3 a.m. In his workshop, Jack wasn't asleep either. He couldn't stop thinking about the statue he'd helped install. Something about it bothered him, though he couldn't explain why. On impulse, he picked up his tools, the same ones he'd used during the installation. His heart skipped a beat. The tools, always kept clean and polished, were covered in rust. Jack rubbed his eyes, thinking it was a trick of the light, but the rust was real. "This is impossible," he muttered. The unease in his chest deepened, and he decided to head to the church first thing in the morning. Meanwhile, Olivia sat alone in the darkened church, reciting her nightly prayers. She found the quiet comforting, but tonight it felt heavy, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Suddenly she heard it, a soft whisper, faint and unclear. She froze, looking around, but the church was empty. The whisper grew louder, the words becoming clear. Guard. Protect. Don't let it out. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. Panicked, she grabbed her rosary and ran out of the church. At the steps, she stumbled into Buddy, who looked up at her with those wise, knowing eyes. His presence calmed her just enough to stop trembling. The next morning, Father Thomas called Rachel, Jack, and Olivia to the parish hall. They all arrived looking pale and tired, their faces marked by the events of the night before. "My friends," Father Thomas began, his voice heavy, "I think we can all feel that something is wrong. Last night wasn't normal, was it?" Rachel broke the silence first. "I had a dream," she said, her voice shaking. "St. John Paul II. He was warning me about something." She described the dream, and the others listened closely. Jack held up a piece of rusted metal, his expression grim. "This was spotless yesterday," he said. "I've never seen rust appear this fast." Olivia wrapped her arms around herself. "I heard whispers in the church," she confessed. "They were telling me to protect something, to keep it from getting out." Father Thomas let out a long sigh. "Something is happening in our parish," he said, "and I have a feeling this is only the beginning." At that moment, Tommy the altar boy burst through the door, out of breath. "Father," he exclaimed, "Buddy is gone, and something's wrong with the stained glass windows." The group rushed to the church. When they stepped inside, they froze in shock. The stained glass, which had always shown peaceful biblical scenes, now seemed alive. The figures moved, their expressions dark and foreboding, as if trying to escape their frames. Father Thomas's gaze fell on the statue of St. John Paul II. He stepped closer and saw something he hadn't noticed before. A faint inscription at the base, carved in Latin. He leaned in to read the words, "Cadest infernum main infernum." "What is hellish? Let it remain hellish." Rachel shivered. "What does it mean, Father?" He straightened up, his face pale. "It means something is trying to escape," he said quietly, "and I fear it's up to us to stop it." Father Thomas stood silently in front of the statue, the weight of the Latin inscription heavy in his mind. Cadest infernum main infernum. What is hellish? Let it remain hellish. His hand brushed over the faint crack at its base. Whatever was happening in the church, it wasn't just coincidence. Before he could speak, Tommy, the altar boy, broke the silence. "Father, Buddy is gone. He never leaves the churchyard, but no one can find him anywhere," Tommy said, his voice trembling. "And the windows." Tommy trailed off, gesturing toward the stained glass. The group turned to look, and their jaws dropped. The biblical scenes, once still and peaceful, were now shifting. The figures seemed to move subtly, their faces full of sorrow or anger. In one pane, a shepherd stared directly at them, his expression pleading. In another, a fiery angel raised its sword, as if warning them. "It's like they're alive," Olivia whispered, her voice barely audible. Father Thomas swallowed hard. "This is not normal. Something is stirring, and it's connected to that statue." Rachel stepped closer to the statue, trying to make sense of the inscription. "What does this mean? What's hellish? What are we supposed to do?" Father Thomas shook his head. "I don't know yet, but we need to find out." Determined to get answers, the group began searching through the church archives. Hours passed as they sifted through dusty books and forgotten documents. Finally, Rachel let out a gasp. "Look at this!" she exclaimed, holding up an old journal. The leather-bound book was faded, its pages brittle with age. On one page was a hand-drawn sketch of a similar statue, accompanied by hurried notes. "It says here," Rachel read aloud, "that a statue just like this one appeared in another church decades ago. Strange events followed, unexplained phenomena, people disappearing. It all started with the statue." Father Thomas furrowed his brow. "And how did it end?" Rachel turned the page and froze. Her voice shook as she read, "It says the disturbances only stopped when the statue was destroyed, but not before someone opened a gate." "A gate?" Jack asked, leaning forward. "Yes," Rachel replied, flipping through the journal. "It doesn't say what kind of gate, but it was tied to something ancient, something powerful." Father Thomas stood, his expression grim. "If that gate was opened once, it could happen again. We need to stop it before it's too late." Suddenly the church trembled. A low rumble echoed through the building, shaking the pews and sending a cascade of dust from the rafters. The group exchanged panicked looks. "That didn't feel like an earthquake," Olivia said. "No," Jack added, his voice tense. "It felt close, like it came from beneath us." The group hurried toward the altar, following the faint vibration that seemed to pulse from below. Tommy hesitated at the back, his eyes wide. "Should I call for help?" he asked nervously. "No," Father Thomas said firmly. "This stays between us for now. We don't want to spread fear." As they knelt near the base of the statue, the rumbling stopped. Father Thomas reached for the crack Buddy had scratched at earlier. With a hesitant hand, he pressed against it, and to his surprise, the stone shifted slightly. "This isn't just a crack," he murmured. "It's some kind of seal." "A seal for what?" Rachel asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Father Thomas admitted. "But whatever it's holding back, it's not meant to come out." The group sat back in silence, the gravity of the situation sinking in. Outside, the faint sound of barking echoed through the air. "Buddy," Olivia whispered. "No," Jack said, shaking his head. "That doesn't sound like him." Father Thomas rose, his expression resolute. "Whatever this is, it's only beginning. We need to prepare ourselves." The group gathered in the quiet of the parish hall, the tension between them thick. Father Thomas looked at the tired faces of Rachel, Jack, and Olivia. Each of them carried the weight of the past 2 days. Nights without sleep, strange occurrences, and a growing sense that something dark was brewing. "My friend," he began, "it's clear we've been brought together for a reason. Something dangerous is happening, and it's up to us to stop it." Rachel nodded. "But how? We don't even understand what's going on yet." "We start with what we do know," Father Thomas said. "The statue, the gate, the warnings. We need to uncover the truth before it's too late. This can't involve anyone else. If we fail, no one else should be at risk." Jack leaned back, arms crossed. "I can work on securing the church. If there's something underground, I'll figure out a way to keep it sealed, at least for now." "I'll keep digging through the journal," Rachel added. "It's full of notes and symbols, but I'm starting to see patterns. Maybe there's something in there that can help." Olivia hesitated. "And I'll try to listen." Her voice was soft. "The whispers I've been hearing, they're not random. Maybe the spirits of past guardians are trying to guide us." Father Thomas looked at each of them with gratitude. "We'll need all of those skills and more. This isn't just about protecting the church. It's about protecting the balance of our world. Suddenly, they heard a noise. Buddy's familiar bark rang out, and they rushed outside to find the dog standing by the church doors, his gaze fixed on them. It was as if he understood what they were discussing. Even Buddy knows what's at stake, Jack said with a half smile, though his voice was laced with unease. The group began their preparations. Over the following days, Jack used his mechanical expertise to reinforce the church's foundations. He worked late into the night, installing locks and hidden barriers to guard the statue. Rachel buried herself in the journal, painstakingly cataloging its cryptic contents. She discovered references to an ancient artifact, the key mentioned in the whispers, which might be the only way to permanently seal the gate. Olivia spent her nights in silent prayer, trying to interpret the voices that echoed in her mind. She found that singing calmed the energy in the church, and she started incorporating these hymns into her routine. Meanwhile, Father Thomas wrestled with his own challenges. As a priest, he had to remain a source of faith and stability for the parish, even as his own beliefs were shaken. He spent hours in prayer, seeking guidance. Late one evening, as they gathered to discuss their progress, the room grew colder. The lights flickered, and Buddy growled low in his throat. A faint, glowing figure appeared, a spirit, ancient and wise. "Do not be afraid," the spirit said, its voice calm yet powerful. "You have been chosen as guardians. The knowledge you seek is dangerous, but you must protect it. The gate must remain sealed, or the consequences will be devastating." When the spirit vanished, the group sat in stunned silence. Olivia was the first to speak. "We're not just protecting a secret," she whispered. "We're protecting the balance of the world." Father Thomas stood, his face resolute. "Then we must act like guardians. No matter what happens, we cannot let this gate be opened." The storm rolled in as if summoned by the growing tension in Millbrook. Dark clouds gathered over the town, and rain began to lash against the windows of St. Michael's Church. Inside, Father Thomas and the group worked, tirelessly. They couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. "It's today," Father Thomas said quietly, standing by the altar. His voice was steady, but his expression was grim. "I can feel it in the air." Rachel nodded, clutching the journal tightly. "The boundaries between worlds are thinning. If we don't act, they'll break." Jack double-checked the security measures he'd installed around the church. "Everything's ready," he said, though his tone carried doubt. "But will it be enough?" "It has to be," Olivia replied firmly. She placed a hand on Jack's shoulder, offering a small but determined smile. "We've done everything we can." Suddenly, Buddy let out a low, warning growl. His gaze was fixed on the darkness beyond the church's stained glass windows. At the same moment, Father Thomas felt a sudden warmth in his pocket. He reached inside and pulled out the key they had found, a small, ancient object inscribed with strange symbols. It seemed to pulse with energy, as if warning them. "It's beginning," Father Thomas said, his voice barely above a whisper. Outside, figures emerged from the shadows. They moved slowly but purposefully, their shapes illuminated by flashes of lightning. At first glance, they looked like ordinary people, but something was off. Their eyes glowed faintly, and their movements were too fluid, almost unnatural. "Who are they?" Rachel asked, fear creeping into her voice. "Cultists," Father Thomas replied grimly. "They must have been drawn here by the energy of the gate." The cultists approached the church doors, and the leader, a tall man with a pale, gaunt face, stepped forward. He smiled coldly, his eyes gleaming with an unnatural light. "We've come for the book and the key," he said, his voice smooth and calm. "There's no need to fight. Hand them over, and no one will get hurt." Father Thomas stepped forward, holding the key tightly in his hand. "You have no idea what you're meddling with," he said firmly. "This power isn't meant for mortals." The cultist leader's smile widened. "On the contrary, Father, we know exactly what we're dealing with. The gate will open, and we'll claim the divine power that lies beyond it." Rachel stepped beside Father Thomas, her voice trembling but resolute. "That power isn't divine. It's dangerous. It was sealed for a reason." The cultists didn't respond. Instead, they began chanting softly, their voices rising in unison. The air grew heavier, and the church seemed to tremble. "Get ready," Jack muttered, stepping back toward the altar. Without warning, the cultists charged. The church erupted into chaos as the guardians sprang into action. Jack and Olivia worked to hold off the intruders, while Rachel and Father Thomas focused on the statue. The rumbling beneath the church grew louder, and cracks began to spread across the floor. The gate was opening. "Father!" Rachel shouted over the noise. "The key! It's reacting to the gate!" Father Thomas stared at the key in his hand. It glowed brightly, its symbols shifting as if alive. He knew what he had to do. "Hold them off!" he yelled to the others. "I'm going to the gate!" Buddy barked loudly, leaping at one of the cultists who had gotten too close to Rachel. The dog's movements were sharp and precise, as if he knew exactly where to strike. Meanwhile, Father Thomas and Rachel reached the base of the statue. Beneath it, the stone had split open, revealing a faint glowing light. The gate was visible now, its surface swirling like liquid fire. Figures began to emerge, beings from myth and legend, some beautiful, others terrifying. "We have to stop this," Rachel said, her voice shaking. Father Thomas nodded. "And we will, no matter what it takes." The gate loomed before them, its swirling light casting eerie shadows on the walls of the church. Figures from another realm began to step through, their shapes shifting between beauty and horror. The air grew thick with energy, making it hard to breathe. Father Thomas stood at the edge of the gate, the ancient key glowing brightly in his hand. He turned to Rachel, his face calm but resolute. "This is the only way to close it," he said softly. "No," Rachel whispered, shaking her head. "There has to be another way." "There isn't," Father Thomas said. "The key was made to seal the gate, but it has to be used from the other side." Tears welled up in Rachel's eyes. "You can't—" "I have to," Father Thomas interrupted gently. "If I don't, the worlds will merge, and the chaos will consume everything. This is my duty." Jack and Olivia rushed forward, their faces pale as they realized what was happening. "Father, no!" Jack shouted. "There has to be another way." But Father Thomas only smiled sadly. "You're the guardians now. You can protect this place and the world. But this is something only I can do." Before anyone could stop him, Father Thomas stepped into the gate. "Father, no!" Rachel cried, reaching out, but it was too late. The moment his body passed through the swirling light, the entire church was filled with a blinding brilliance. The gate pulsed violently, and the ground shook as if the earth itself was protesting. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the chaos stopped. When the light faded, the gate was gone. The glowing crack beneath the statue had sealed itself, leaving no trace of the portal that had been there moments before. The cultists lay unconscious on the floor, and the mythical beings had vanished. But so had Father Thomas. Rachel, Jack, and Olivia stood in a stunned silence, their eyes fixed on the empty space where the gate had been. Buddy let out a soft, mournful whimper, his head hanging low. "He's gone," Olivia whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Jack clenched his fists. "He sacrificed himself to save us all." Tears streamed down Rachel's face as she sank to her knees. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. A gentle breeze swept through the church, carrying with it a sense of peace. A familiar, luminous figure appeared in the air, the spirit of the ancient guardian who had visited them before. "Father Thomas is not gone forever," the spirit said, its voice calm and comforting. "He has become part of the story, part of the balance that you must now protect. Your mission is not over. It is only beginning." The spirit pointed toward the journal and the key, which now lay on the altar. "This knowledge must be protected, but it must also be used wisely. The world needs guardians to maintain the balance between what is seen and what is hidden. That is your purpose now." As the spirit vanished, Rachel wiped her tears and stood. There was sadness in her eyes, but also determination. "We'll honor his sacrifice," she said firmly. "We'll make sure his story doesn't end here." Jack nodded. "We've come this far. We can't give up now." Olivia placed a hand on Buddy's head, her voice steady. "Together, we'll protect the balance." And so, though their hearts were heavy with loss, the guardians stood united. They had faced the unthinkable and survived. But deep down, they all knew their journey was far from over. In the days following Father Thomas's sacrifice, the church stood quiet, almost as if mourning his loss. But for Rachel, Jack, Olivia, and Buddy, there was no time to grieve fully. They had a mission now, one they had vowed to carry on in Father Thomas's name. "We can't let his sacrifice be in vain," Rachel said during one of their first meetings. "We have to make sure this never happens again." The group quickly divided responsibilities. Rachel took charge of the journal, studying its pages late into the night. Each time she uncovered a new symbol or phrase, she recorded it meticulously, building a catalog of knowledge that could help them in the future. Jack returned to his workshop, refining the protective systems he had already built around the church. Using the symbols Rachel found in the journal, he designed new devices, ones that could sense disturbances in the energy around the church and alert them to any danger. Olivia, meanwhile, discovered that her connection to the whispers had grown stronger. Through quiet meditation and prayer, she began communicating with the spirits of past guardians. They offered her guidance, sharing lessons from their own struggles. This knowledge became invaluable as the group faced new challenges. And then there was Buddy. The stray dog, once just a friendly presence around town, had become an essential part of their team. He seemed to sense danger before it even appeared, often barking or growling moments before something strange happened. Their first real test came during the town's annual festival. As music and laughter filled the streets, the Guardians noticed something unusual. The carousel in the town square spun faster and faster, its painted horses seemingly moving on their own. Children screamed in fear as the ride spiraled out of control. The group sprang into action. Jack used one of his devices to slow the carousel's motion, while Olivia began to sing. Her voice carried a strange, calming energy that soothed both the frightened children and the chaotic forces surrounding the ride. Rachel, thinking quickly, created a distraction by telling onlookers the malfunction was due to mechanical failure. Meanwhile, Buddy barked and herded people away from the danger zone. Within minutes, the situation was under control. Afterward, the townspeople chalked it up to a strange but harmless incident. But the Guardians knew better. The boundary between worlds had grown thin that day, and only their intervention had prevented disaster. As weeks turned into months, the Guardians began to notice subtle changes in Millbrook. The town seemed to flourish in ways that couldn't be explained. Crops grew healthier, businesses thrived, and people seemed happier. Visitors often remarked on the town's special energy, though they couldn't quite put it into words. "This town feels different," one traveler said to Rachel during a chance meeting, "like there's something magical about it." But with this newfound prosperity came new challenges. The Guardians realized that the energy surrounding Millbrook was attracting attention, from curious strangers to those with more sinister intentions. "We need to stay vigilant," Jack said during one of their meetings. "We're not the only ones who've noticed what's happening here." Rachel, Jack, Olivia, and Buddy stood united. They had stepped into a role they never expected, but they were determined to honor Father Thomas's legacy. Together, they would protect Millbrook and the balance between worlds. And though they still felt the loss of their mentor, they knew he would always be with them. In the echoes of their prayers, the strength of their unity, and the unyielding resolve to guard the hidden secrets of their small town. Years passed, but the memory of Father Thomas never faded. His name became a quiet legend in Millbrook, spoken with reverence by those who knew the truth and with curiosity by those who sensed something extraordinary about the church. For Rachel, Jack, and Olivia, the weight of their roles as guardians grew heavier with time. Each day brought new challenges, strange occurrences in the town, whispers of outsiders seeking the church's secrets, and the ever-present task of keeping the balance intact. Yet with each challenge, they grew stronger, more united. As they watched over Millbrook, the Guardians began to think about the future. They knew they couldn't protect the town forever. The knowledge and responsibilities they carried would one day need to be passed on. "We have to prepare for the next generation," Rachel said during one of their meetings. "We need to teach them what we've learned. Everything Father Thomas taught us." Jack nodded. "The town is full of young people with potential. We just need to find the ones who can handle the truth." Olivia agreed, her voice calm but certain. "This isn't just about passing on knowledge. It's about finding people who understand the balance, people who respect both the ordinary and the extraordinary." The Guardians began quietly observing the youth of Millbrook, looking for signs of awareness and strength. They saw it in small ways: a curious glance at the church, an intuitive question, or a natural ability to connect with others. As the years went by, Rachel, Jack, and Olivia began training these individuals, sharing their wisdom piece by piece. Slowly but surely, the torch was passed, ensuring that Millbrook would always have protectors to guard its hidden secrets and preserve the delicate balance between worlds. Millbrook became a place where the ordinary and extraordinary lived side by side. For most of the town's residents, life went on as usual. They visited the markets, gathered at festivals, and attended Mass at St. Michael's Church, unaware of the quiet battle being fought to protect their peace. But beneath the surface, the Guardians continued their work. Rachel, Jack, Olivia, and Buddy had dedicated their lives to preserving the balance between worlds. Their efforts ensured that the fragile boundary between the seen and unseen remained intact. Rachel often spoke to her students about the importance of balance, weaving subtle lessons about harmony and respect into her teachings. Magic exists, she would say, but it doesn't always look the way we expect. Sometimes it's in the ordinary things we overlook. Jack, ever the tinkerer, continued refining his protective devices. He had become an expert in deciphering the ancient symbols, combining them with modern technology to create tools that could safeguard the church and the town. Olivia's gift for connecting with the spirits grew stronger with time. Her hymns carried a power that seemed to calm the restless energy surrounding the church. Through her connection with past guardians, she discovered new ways to protect the balance and keep the gates sealed. And Buddy, loyal and watchful, was always by their side. The dog's uncanny intuition made him the first line of defense against any disturbance. His presence became a source of comfort for the Guardians, a reminder that even in the face of the unknown, they were never alone. The years turned into decades, and Millbrook thrived. Visitors often remarked on the town's unique energy, calling it a place where miracles felt possible. But the Guardians knew that this harmony came at a cost they were willing to pay. As they grew older, the original Guardians began to step back, allowing the next generation to take their place. Rachel, Jack, and Olivia had trained them well, passing on not just their knowledge but the values of courage, humility, and respect for the unknown. One quiet evening, Rachel stood at the altar, looking at the statue of St. John Paul II. The crack at its base was still faintly visible, a reminder of the day everything changed. She felt a sense of peace, knowing they had done their part to honor Father Thomas's sacrifice. "Do you think he'd be proud of us?" Olivia asked, standing beside her. Rachel smiled softly. "I think he always was." Outside the church, Buddy barked, drawing their attention. They stepped out to find the new Guardians gathered near the church steps, laughing and sharing stories. The sight warmed Rachel's heart. "This town will be in good hands," Jack said, joining them. Olivia nodded. "The balance will hold." As the sun set over Millbrook, casting golden light across the cobblestone streets, the Guardians stood together one last time. Though their journey had been long and difficult, they had found purpose and meaning in their mission. And somewhere, in a place beyond time, Father Thomas watched over them, his spirit a part of the story they had helped to write. The tale of St. Michael's Church and its Guardians would live on, a quiet legend passed down through generations. It reminded those who heard it that the world was full of mysteries, and that sometimes the greatest magic was simply keeping the balance.